Okay, I'm back. I decided to do this little post-mortem video in a way just to show you how things went. So I finished the rig for the scapula on the left side of the character, and as you can see, I have my weight map here, and I also copied the animation from one side to the other, so you can see both sides are behaving the same. Now, there's a couple of things I wanted to still mention because they're important. And it's first, when creating the rig for the other side, you'll probably see that there's a few values that you'll need to mirror. Like some of my math operators here required a different sign for the operation being performed. So for example, on the one side, you have here this -5 and -2, which is negative. For the opposite side, they need it to be positive. And this is something you'll easily notice if you have your animation copied from one side to the other. Sometimes you'll see the scapula move on the right axis, but in the wrong direction. That basically means just you're using the wrong sign. That's all. So just a matter of changing that. The other thing I had missed in the previous video was one of the tests up here. I forgot to change the channels, the if true and if false channels, to output the true and false value channels. They were left to output value A and value B. So that was giving me the wrong behavior from this test. I had to switch it back to A is less than, and actually let's rename it to reflect that. So that's something I needed to change. And the last thing is there were a few things I had to also do in between the time I was working on this character and the time I finished the previous video. And it's when we performed that smooth operation, the smooth selected operation on the weight map on this side, that extended the range of the weight map all the way to the head and the arms and part of the torso. So we had like really small values contaminating here the head of the character. So all I did is I selected that weight map. Let's see where it is. This guy right here, and I performed a cull operation on it. So I culled all the weights below 0.005. And that got rid of most of them. And then I just basically selected a few that I didn't like manually here on the shoulders. There's no reason why the scapula would affect over there. So I selected a few vertices and just adjusted their weights to 0. So I just had this area pretty clean. And I think that's it. That's all I did for this guy, and I have everything constrained. There is just one thing that we actually forgot to do, and it's important. And you might notice it, for example, when we go on, our character gets posed like this, which is an extreme pose, but anyway. And you get that. And that's not really nice. And basically all we forgot is we forgot to take our general influences and make them part of the normalizing folder, the body bind. But for me to do this, I'm going to first do something else. I'm going to change the way this is set up, because if I want to rebind this at some point, I'm going to need something that can actually follow the hierarchy of the character. And right now we don't have that. So we're going to need a few more locators to finish the setup. And we're going to do what we did for the pectorals. We're going to create locators that basically just become part of the deforming skeleton. So let's show the deforming skeleton and hide the torso. There you go. So let's get this done very quickly. I'm going to create a locator here, and I'm going to drag and drop it with my drop action set to match onto this parent right there. And let's set its display to be a sphere. Let's make him smaller. Something like that. Let's see what we called this guy? This guy's called... okay, let's copy that name for the pectoral deformer, and let's paste it onto this locator, but this guy's name is going to be scapula. Okay, deformer, scapula. Let's duplicate it and match that one on the opposite side. And we're going to call him, of course, scapula left. Okay, and let's duplicate both a second time. And we're going to take the duplicates and make them children of these guys. And let's drag them out of the characters back, and let's make them smaller too. Even smaller than that, because these guys are just, they are our Terminators. It's like these guys. They're the Terminator. So we're going to put that in their names. Let's also match the colors that these guys are using. So let's see what color they are. 1.20. So let's select all this. 1.20. There we are. And now we need to make these guys part of the deforming skeleton. So I believe we had made them children of this friend right here. Let's locate it. Spine 05. Yeah, there they are. Our pec deformers are there. So we're going to do the same with these two guys. Let's select them. I'm going to maximize that for a second. So select these two guys and drag them over to spine 05. And now they're part of the hierarchy. And we can unbind and rebind this whenever we want, which is great. And now, of course, we need to constrain them. We need to parent constrain them and re-rig part of the setup, because now it's these guys who are going to be deforming the mesh. So let's add them here. This is the right scapula. This is the left scapula. Let's go into setup mode. And we're going to disconnect the locator from the effector channel. We're going to connect the actual deformer. So now it's these guys deforming the mesh of the character. So now all we need to do is to parent constrain them to their locators. Not the push, mind me. Yeah, actually it is the push locator that is deforming the mesh. It's just that it's the capsules that shape the deformation based on their movement. But yeah, it's this guy. So we're going to parent constrain them, yes, to their respective push locators. So let's go to modifiers, add a dynamic parent. Same to this guy, add the dynamic parent. Let's move these guys back. And let's see what we got. Okay, everything is following. We still have this problem right here. And basically what we have is double transforms. So let's solve those right away. What we need to do is to take these guys and put them into the body bind normalizing folder. This is going to affect a little bit the shape of the of the deformations, because now they're getting normalized with the rest of the torso. But as you can see, now we don't have any double transforms. Let's see if the poses are still right. You can always go back and tweak how much the vertices are gonna move out based on the pose of the character. So let's see, for example, over here. Looks like we have a bunch of duplicate influences there. I'm gonna have to look into that. Yeah, it's not too much. So you can always go back and take the push locators and move them back further if you want to accentuate that deformation. And we're done. Our character is ready to go and fight crime or whatever he does. Well, almost. There's only one thing that's left to do. We'll do it in the next video. And I'm also going to clean up all these influences. I think they were a result of, at some point, we duplicated something that brought the entire mesh with it. And all the references or all the dependencies that the mesh had on it. So I deleted a few before, but looks like I just found these guys in here. So all I have to do is basically delete them because they don't belong to anything. But you don't need to stay and watch this. So I'll let you go and I'll see you in the next video. Hey, me again. There's a couple more things that I wanted to show you about this scapular rig that I just noticed. The first one is, and this is quite interesting, I'm not sure at what point this happened. It might have been when we put our general influences inside of the, not this one, the normalizing folder with the body bind. We moved them in here. But I did notice that when I came back to the schematic view, that the fall-offs have been disconnected. So you might want to check that out and see if it happened. And then if that did happen, just connect them back, and that should put the character back into using only the fall-offs when they are needed. Okay. And the other thing is also, now that our influences are part of the normalizing folder, the influence on the vertices is a lot less obvious. So one thing you can do to remedy that is we can adjust the weights on the weight map. So for example, I can select the right scapula weight map, and let's select the vertices that belong to that weight map right there. Okay, and let's adjust their weights. So for example, I'm going to drive these guys that are 77% up to 100. Like so. A little bit below 99. And I'm going to keep the rest of the weights relative to that. And I'm going to do the same for the other weight map. Oops, I went too far. There you go. So now the weight maps have a little bit more weight onto them when compared to the rest of the weight maps on the torso area. So that will force a little bit more deformations coming from these guys. And that's all. That's all I wanted to show you related to this guy. I think we're pretty much done with this setup. So let's move on to the next one. And the last thing we have left to do for us to finish with the setup for the body of the character is to see how we can have some post-based morphing done. And post-based morphing is basically when you take a certain morph shape and you morph onto it based on a certain pose on the character. And this is very useful when you're trying to pretty much sculpt the character to hit certain specific poses. For example, let's say that I want that when the forearm of the character rotates forward, the biceps should bulge up and have a different shape. So we can do those things here directly in Modo. So the first thing I'm going to do is let's close this up. And no, I don't want to see any of this. And let's go back here. First thing I'm going to do is, well, pose my hero character with the pose of the arm that I need. That means the forearm rotated forward. So let's unhide the arm rig. This is the leg. Where's the arm? Here it is. And let's create a little animation for that. So let's see where we have some space. I think over here is going to be perfect. Oh no, he's already moving the arm over here. So let's add some frames to our little workspace. There we go. And here at this frame, let's take this control and key the Y channel. And let's move over here, rotate it forward. That's going to be our target pose right there. And over here we go back to 0. Okay, so that's great. Perfect. So what we need to do now is let's hide the controls. We don't need them anymore. And let's hide the rig on the torso. What I need to do is to be able to sculpt this based on this pose and then import that as a morph. So let's do that. Let's first create a new morph map for our mesh. Let's go to lists and let's go to morph maps. And let's call this one pose bulge biceps. Oh, and we forgot that it's the right side. Okay, it's a relative morph. There it is. So now what we need to do is sculpt some information into this morph map. So let's go to our paint workspace. But here's an interesting thing. When we are in this workspace, we cannot see any deformations happening. So it's going to be really difficult for us to sculpt like that. So let's try first enabling them. Looks like that might work. So I'm going to try sculpting my mesh like this. I'm going to make sure that my morph map is selected. And let's move a few vertices around. And I cannot see what they're doing because of the deformations. So I need to disable this to be able to see what's going on, which is a little bit, a lot of back and forth to enable and disable deformations. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to create a new window, or actually a new palette, a new view. So let's get a 3D view. Okay, and let's keep this one. As you can see in this one, deformers is enabled. So what I'm going to do is sculpt in this one the pose that I think I would need. Now here you can't see anything, like, well, I'm not really seeing what's going to happen to the other viewport, but you can easily do it the following way. Let's select our morph map. Let's right click and create the morph influence. And as you can see, he immediately shows you the result of the morph already working. So let's sculpt our biceps here into the shape that we think will be the good shape for a bulged biceps. And let's say that something like that is just what we need. And let's also move a little bit these guys to the front. And maybe these guys too. I'm going to try to make this as fast as possible. And yeah, this guy too. Oops, looks like I moved that one too far. And yeah, I think this will do. Okay, so now we have a morph shape that we can trigger. So let's go back to setup, to the setup layout. As you can see, we have there our morph, and it's right here. Here's our morph influence. And let's put it in the morph influences group locator. And let's call it morph influence, right? What did I call this guy? The well, bulge bicep. Okay, that will do. And now we have that, and we can, as you can see, morph the biceps bulging or not. But we don't want this to be animated manually. We want this to be automated. So how do we go about automating it? Well, it's actually pretty simple. What we're going to do is, let's bring again our right arm rig. And we're going to drive this using a different thing in the rig. So there's something very useful we can use for this perfect scenario. So we're gonna need both the upper arm and the lower arm blending joints. Let's see what we got here. So here they are. We don't need any of the other nodes that decided to come along for the ride. Okay. And we're also going to need this guy's child, which is this one, the joint wrist. And we have a node that allows us to measure an angle in between different items in the scene. So let's add that. It's a measure angle node. So this guy requires world positions, and you say the position from, position A, and position B, and it's going to give you an angle. So the position from, let's use the upper arm, okay? And then the position to A, let's use the wrist, and then this guy for the position B. And oh, actually it's the other the other way around. As you can see, we're measuring but from the upper arm. Well, that's not what we want. So we want to measure position from, it's going to be this guy, position A, position B. Let's see if that gets it right. There you go. So we have an angle of 84 degrees, okay? So this guy is going from 155 point something degrees to 84 something degrees, okay? Now, how do we convert this to a value that can drive our bicep bulge morph influence? Let's add it to the schematic since we're at that. And we're gonna add also its strength channel. That's what we're going to drive. Let's set it to 0 for now. So I can't connect this angle output directly because first of all, it's an angle value. And then I don't need it to go from 155 to 84. So we need to do a little rig to get this going, okay? So the first thing we need to do is when this is 155, I would like this to be 0. So let's begin by that. Let's begin by subtracting the same value we have right here at the rest pose, which is 155, 74, 25. So we'll enter it here. Okay, so that sets our math node to 0. Now when the rotation is complete, the math node is giving me a value of 70. Okay, and we need this to be 100. So we need to multiply this by some number that will give me 100. So to do that, well, if you do it on paper, which I'm doing it right now, so you have 70 multiplied by x will give you 100. It means that x is equal 100 divided by 70.1942. Okay, so you can just bring in your calculator. Let's see what we get. 100 divided by 70.1942, and that's 1.4246. There's going to be a little round off error here, but it's okay. We don't really have to be troubled by that. So all we have to do is take this number and multiply it by that number. So we'll multiply this by 1.4246. See, gives 100, and we have to do it negative, so we get a positive number back. Perfect. So now we have a 100, but actually I believe this guy will require, let's see, yeah, it's a percent value that it's going to look for. So let's see what happens if we just plug it directly. 100. That's a lot. We have to divide this by 100. And math divide. So it has to be normalized to 1. And there you go. Let's see what it looks like. As you can see, it bulges as the arm rotates. Again, I'm not the best sculptor, but you get the point. And now, to do this on the other side of the character, let's take our friend here. Let's go back to the lists, and let's create a new morph map. Actually, no, I don't need to create a new morph map. It's going to be created automatically for me. So all I have to do is set my symmetry axis, which is the x-axis. I'm going to copy this morph map from this side to that side. And let's make sure that we have the source morph map selected. And we're going to go to vertex map, mirror. So we have to select the source morph map. So let's see. All these are weight maps. Here it is. Morph map. Pose are bulge biceps. And we're going to call this one pose left bulge biceps. And there it is. So let's create our morph influence. And there you go. There it is, our morph influence for the other arm. So all we have to do, morph influence left bulge biceps. Let's bring it in into our group locator. There it goes. And now we have to rig it exactly the same way we just did on this side of the character. So I don't need to explain to you anymore how this is done. I'm just going to go back and do it, and I'll be back in a second. Okay, I'm done. Here it is. Identical rig. Took me the same amount of time to do it. It's pretty simple, super fast. You just bring in your joints, measure the angle between them, do the appropriate math, and plug that into your morph influence. And as you can see, when I take this guy and I rotate it, I'm triggering my morph on this side of the character. So you can use this technique to pose the mesh in very specific ways depending on the rotations of the joints. You could do that, for example, so that when the character bends his knees or rotates his lower leg, you could see also some movement on the back of the thigh, like this muscle should contract, go up, and bulge up here. So you can set all that up and do all sorts of neat things when it comes to morphing stuff using angles like these. So that's pretty much it. As you can see, it was pretty simple and fast. You can also sculpt your morph targets in an external application and bring them in and plug them in using the background morph tool, as we've done before. But this is it. And this basically concludes all the work we had to do on our character smash. That doesn't mean we're done with the formations yet. We still have to cover a few things that are left. There's not much left though. We're almost done with that. So let's keep moving.